Come on, let's go on a journey. Sit back, buckle up, enjoy the ride with Crystal Petry. Consulting, so inspiring.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of 60 Minutes With. I'm your host, Crystal Petry. And wherever you are, whatever you're doing, make sure and subscribe to my podcast right now. On this week's episode of 60 Minutes With, I have quilter Cathy Williams. She's going to talk to us about quilting. What utensils do you need? How long does it take? But also how she's using her gift of quilting to tell the African American story. Welcome to the podcast, Ms. Cathy Williams.
Thank you, Crystal, so much for contacting me and reaching out. I'm really excited to be here.
Thank you. I've heard and seen quilts. I feel like we probably all have, but I've never met someone that is a quilter. So when I say you are a quilter, what does that exactly mean?
Okay, well, a quilt is a three-part, it's considered three parts. It's the top layer of fabric, it's the middle layer that's usually some sort of a batting, cotton or wool or whatever, and then a backing. And then the process of stitching these three layers together is called quilting. So it's actually a quilt. People say that if you don't do the quilting, then you didn't do the quilt, but that's not true. It's all part of it. I create the tops. I'm really not interested in doing the stitching together, the three layers part. I have two team members that are awesome that do that for me. But a quilt is three layers of fabric, a top, a batting, and a backing, stitched together.
So in order for anything to be considered a quilt, it has to have those three layers.
Three components, yes.
As a quilter, does that mean that you are a creative? Because people use that term so much now. Or do you have to be creative to be a quilter?
I personally am creative, and I think that if I didn't have the creativity within me, then I would find it difficult. But you can create a quilt, just three layers of fabric stitched together. It doesn't have to necessarily be fancy or a picture or whatever, because there are traditional utility quilts that you make that are used on beds or for throws or whatever, that are not necessarily, you don't have to really be creative to do it. You just have to know how to sew. So yeah, I don't think you have to be necessarily creative to create a quilt. Now, to create an art quilt is a different story. I think you have to have some level of creativity.
Okay. What age did you start quilting?
I learned what quilting was from my great-grandmother. She used to sit on the front porch in her swing with her basket of fabric next to her, and she taught my sister and I think I probably was about 9 or 10, how to sew together by hand. She sewed everything by hand. Sew together 4 squares of fabric to make a quilt block. That did not catch on. Mm-hmm. I don't necessarily like hand quilting. I don't like to do anything by hand, really. I'm a machine person. But that was my introduction to what a quilt is. But I didn't really actually start making quilts until, I've always sewn. I started sewing in the 7th grade. But my first quilt that I made was for my mother about 30 years ago. I made her a memory quilt with all the pictures of all her grandchildren on it. And then time passed, I didn't really do anything after that. But now I have 11 grandchildren. So all the grandchildren have quilts, all my children have quilts, all my bonus children have quilts. I've made quilts for friends that have whatever. So yeah, but the art quilting just started in 2020 when COVID hit, and I was invited to participate in this exhibit. This was my first introduction into this world. And I had no idea.
And you got an exhibit out of it?
Yes. I would. Yeah. Yes.
I know it's not luck, but what are the odds?
I know. Well, I ran across on a Facebook page, Women of Color Quilters Network, and it intrigued me. So I went onto their website to figure out what they were all about. And Dr. Carolyn S. Looney, I sent her an email asking her about the organization and how to become a member. And I showed her some examples of my work. And she said, I love your work. The next opportunity that we have, I will reach out. And then about 2 months later, she reached out to me and told me about this exhibit and said, I would love for you to participate. And it was amazing. It was an opening up to this whole world. I had no idea this world even existed.
And the exhibit that we're talking about is your quilt is on display at the Art Museum in Orange, Texas. It will be on display until August 3rd, 2024. Please come and visit the quilting. This is her quilt right here behind me, but there are tons of others in this space. The museum is open from Wednesday through Saturday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. So please, please come out and check this out. So just to recap here, your great-grandmother, and what was her name?
Lucy Hurd.
Lucy Hurd introduced you to quilting and showed you how to do it.
Yes.
Years later, you made a quilt for your mother, and what was her name?
Audrey White.
Audrey White. And then from there, you just kind of sat back and decided, maybe not.
Well, during that time, for 15 years I did costuming for high school in Port Arthur, in Golden Triangle. COVID hit, and that stopped because everything stopped when COVID hit.
Right.
So I stopped doing that, and then this was during the time that I met Dr. Maslumi and got introduced to this. Well, I fell so in love with this, and then the theater teacher that I was costuming for retired. Mm-hmm. So I said, that season of my life is over. The costuming, I loved it. I did it for 15 years. But this is my new season, and I'm going to put my all into this.
And what led to the artistry part of quilting?
Well, I've always liked art. I used to draw when I was young. My mom and dad had pictures of what I drew on the wall and whatever. And even when I was working, I did a mural for my job in the lunchroom. And then my son, when he was younger, he had surgery. He had a hernia. And I was sitting in the doctor's office looking. He had just moved in and the wall was blank. And I said, that wall's pretty blank. I think you need a mural on it. And he hired me to do a mural on this wall. So I took the wallpaper border that was animals. It was like an animal parade. And I reproduced it on the wall in his office. So I've always been artistic, but I had never even considered that a quilt could be art until that Dr. Maslumi introduced it to me.
I know that we are talking about quilting, but just a little time that I've been speaking with you, Georgia, it has occurred to me that you have gotten a lot of where you are because you opened your mouth and said, I want to do this. Can I do this? Speak to that level of confidence.
I've always been confident, and even when I was doing costuming, somebody would say, well, can you do this? And I say, well, nothing's impossible. You find a way. So that's kind of what I do. I find a way. If I'm stuck, I put it aside, I work on something else, and I go back to it until I figure out what to do. It's trial and error. Everything about life is trial and error. Don't ever say you can't do something. And that's what I drill into my grandchildren. In fact, one of my granddaughters that I was particularly close to because she lived close and she was like my ride or die. Okay? But she would always say, I can't do that, Nana. I can't do that, Nana. And I said, yes, you can. Yes, you can. And then I said, you want to write a book? And she said, okay. And so we actually have a published children's book called Yes, You Can.
What?
Because I did not like that phrase, I can't do it. So yeah, I have a published, I forget about that part. But yeah, my granddaughter and I co-authored a book called Yes, You Can.
Does she still say, I can't do that?
No, not really. She of course, now she's 17. Oh. And this was when she was a little girl. But no, all of my grandchildren are go-getters. They really are.
Have you passed or started teaching your children, which of course are older, your grandchildren? Have you taught them about quilting and how to quilt?
The granddaughter that I spoke about, that we wrote the book about, I helped her make a quilt for her mother for Mother's Day several years ago, probably 5 or 6 years ago. And she did like, the sewing or whatever. But kids grow up. She's a basketball star. The other granddaughter is a head cheerleader, and they're not interested in quilting. So, but that's okay. Everybody has to do what they're interested in.
Absolutely.
So nobody, and everybody asks me that, well, are you teaching it to your grandchildren? My grandchildren could care less.
Do you
But they are proud of me. I will say that.
Yes.
They are proud of me.
Do you think that, speaking of, do you think that quilting is a dying art?
I don't. I think that the more and more that I'm introduced to this world, now the quilts, I belong to quite a few quilting groups, not guilds, but like Facebook groups or Instagram, whatever. We're out there, but people are not aware. But no, quilting is not going anywhere. Yeah.
How many quilts have you made?
I thought about that, and when I probably half of them were family.
Okay.
You know?
Yes.
But probably 40 or 50 when I sit and think about it.
40 or 50.
Yeah.
Okay. What does quilting do for you emotionally, Georgia?
It really keeps me in a comfortable, happy place. So it's what I like to do. And during COVID, it was especially nice because you're stuck in a house. You know, what are you going to do? And if I didn't have that to fall back on, I probably would, I don't know what, I'd probably be divorced. But
Hopefully not.
no, in fact, I have a t-shirt that says, quilting because murder is wrong. But no, I really, it really, and it's also an emotional outlet. I did, when George Floyd was murdered, I did a quilt called I Can't Breathe. And I did it because I had all this pent up emotion, you know, sadness and anger and what am I going to do with this? You know, what can I do? And it was my outlet for getting my emotions out on this, and I used this quilt to do that. So.
Your quilt, speaking of George Floyd and of course Cathy Williams behind us, your quilts tell a story. Why did you choose to use your quilts to tell a story?
Because, as Dr. Messinelli has pointed out many times, people don't read, you know, and so if you're trying to get the history out, people will look at a quilt, and people that see my quilt say to me, you know what, I learned something I didn't know. So every quilt that I make, I try to teach a lesson that was not taught to us when we were in school, you know. So I try to make my quilts a teaching moment. And more than one time, when I'm like, I've exhibited in several places, but at the Houston International Quilt Festival, which is one of the largest quilt festivals in the country, people come up to me and say, thank you for this. I had no idea, and if I had not seen your quilt, I wouldn't have thought about it. And people say it's a teaching moment, and I'm going to go home and I'm going to look this up. And that's what I want to do. I want to evoke the emotion and have them think about it after the event, you know? So, yeah.
Your quilts tell a story about the African American existence and life. Why did you choose to focus on that?
First of all, because I'm African American. And then what really got me going is a lot of the things that I quilt about, I had no idea. You know, I just finished a quilt, and actually it will be here tomorrow during the artist talk, that there was a slave horn that they used to blow at 4 o'clock every morning to wake the slaves up. They used to blow it to bring them out of the fields. It's like a 4-foot long horn that they used to blow. I had no idea.
Me either, until you just said that.
Exactly. So I try, it's my way to learn, and it's my way to teach. So that's why I choose this subject.
Which stories, how do you choose which stories to showcase in your quilts?
Usually, when I'm doing research on Black history or little known Black history or whatever, things come to me. I'll see things that I say, oh, well, I didn't know that. How could I translate that into a quilt where somebody would get it, you know? Or at least be sparked to find out more about it. And sometimes things come to me, like I read a poem by Langston Hughes called The Negro Mother. And when I read that, one of my friends contacted me about a portrait she was doing of Langston Hughes. And that's how I got hooked on Langston Hughes, and I started reading some of his poetry. And I read The Negro Mother, and it was like, I have to do something. I mean, it's so poignant and it's so profound, and it's just, you're just moved by it when you read it. So I thought, how can I make this into a quilt where somebody can understand what this means, what he meant with this poem and The Negro Mother. And the only thing I said, the only way that I could make this happen is to make a quilt with this poem on it, this whole poem. So I had to figure out how to do that, where you could do the poem and make it large enough, the letters large enough, where you could read it in a museum setting, like standing 6 feet from it. It had to be large enough for you to read, but it couldn't be so large because it's a very long poem. It couldn't be so large that it would be too big. So I had to figure out exactly how small the letter could be and still be legible. I did that. It's 6 feet tall. The quilt is 6 feet tall, probably about 5 feet wide. And the letters are 3/4 of an inch. And I stitched, each letter is cut out by hand, stitched, with the sewing machine. There's 1,767 letters that I did.
How long did that take?
It took a minute. I'm not sure exactly how long, because when I work on something like that, I leave it and then I come back, I leave it and then I come back. But as I was doing it and I was telling myself, there has to be an easier way. And then my mind said, how dare you? Everything this lady went through, everything every Negro mother went through then and is going through now. Why do you want to cut corners? It's because of her that you could even be here to create this quilt. So I'm going to do this with honor and gratitude. So I stitched around 1,767 3/4 inch letters on this point.
One of the things I love about Langston Hughes, and he's one of my favorite poets, is the way he uses words makes you feel seen, it makes you feel heard, it makes your thoughts and your emotions feel validated.
Exactly. And this poem did all of that. It really did. Yeah.
Why is it important? I understand why it's important for you to tell the story of the African American lived experience. Why do you feel like it's important for other people to know about those stories?
Because those stories are not being told in school. And everybody needs to know their history. If you know your history and where you came from, you'll have a better appreciation for where you are now and where you can move the culture to be in the future.
Okay, so Georgia Williams, we are in the Stark Museum in Orange, Texas, where your quilt exhibit is currently on display. And this one right here is about the female Buffalo soldier, Cathy Williams. So talk to me about this. It's so detailed. How long did this take? Let's just go through the whole thing.
Okay, well, I was fortunate enough to be invited to participate in this exhibit, Black Pioneers, by Dr. Carolyn Maslumi. So my subject matter was Cathy Williams, female Buffalo soldiers. A lot of people don't realize that in the 1800s, there was actually a female that joined the army disguised as a man. Well, this is her story, okay? She was born a slave in 1844, and I depicted her as a slave, and this little person here is actually my grandmother's brother. So I took this picture from my family album to make it also a part of this. And I tried to make it as detailed as possible throughout her whole life. When she was growing up with her mom, when her mom was still living, her mom drilled into her that although we may be enslaved, we're not slaves in our mind, okay? And her mother always told her, and this is Cathy's quote, "I am the daughter of a queen." So we may be enslaved now, but don't let them enslave you mentally. And I really think that's why she was such an independent woman her whole life. This is my depiction of her mom with the tear and her queen grandmother, okay, from Africa. So she was born in 1844 on a slave plantation, a tobacco plantation in Missouri. So this represents the plantation, and these are the tobacco leaves, okay? After her master died in the 1860s, she was confiscated by the Union Army to serve with them during the war, okay? And so they were considered contraband, and she didn't have a choice, she had to go. So she served as a cook and a laundress for this general in the Army, in the Union Army. And so during this time, she learned everything there was to know about being in the Army, okay? Because even though she was doing the cooking and the laundry and all of this, still she knew what Army life was like because she was participating in it, okay? So when the war was over and she just, okay, what am I gonna do? Okay? She said, I wanted to make a living and not be dependent on my relatives and friends. That's a quote from her. So what could she do? She decided she was going to join the army with her cousin and one of his friends disguised as a man. So she changed her name from Cathy Williams to William Cathay. She just added an A to her first name and made her last name Cathay. This behind her right here is an actual picture of her enlistment form. Okay? And this is my rendition of Cathy Williams. Nobody actually knows or seen a picture of her. They just, in my research of her, which I did a lot of research before I created the quilt, of the description of her, she was kind of a big woman, you know, kind of dark skinned, and they could see how she could easily disguise herself and look like a man. So this was my rendition of what Cathy Williams may have looked like. Okay, so I wanted to make it, all of this is applique, and I usually do like the little details, like this is an actual button on her shirt. I do a lot of painting to make it look dimensional. So after she got out of the army, she served from 1866 to 1868. The reason she got out was she was in the hospital and they discovered she was a woman.
Hospitals.
Yes. She was actually ill during the 2 years that she was in there, but this last time, and then some of the stories that I've read in the books, some of her quotes was, she was really ready to get out. So I think that that last hospital stay, when they discovered, she really was not sad that they did. She was really ready to get out. Okay, she got out in 1868. This is an actual copy of her discharge papers. During the time that she got out, she decided she was going to work for herself, so she became a seamstress and did whatever other odd jobs she could do. She did get married, but after being married a couple of years, her husband stole her money and her wagon and left. Well, she had him hunted down and put in jail.
Good.
She wasn't having that.
Good.
Okay, so anyway, she found out that other women, not of color, had gotten disability from serving. Okay, so she decided that since she got a disability discharge because she was ill, but they rejected her application, and it's been questioned, did they reject it because she was illegally in the army, or did they reject it because she was a woman of color? Nobody's ever going to know that.
Did she apply for the disability as William, as a man, or did she apply for a disability as
Well, I
Cathy?
think well, it was kind of a gray spot, because, I mean, they knew her name was not William Cathay.
Oh, by
but
this
in
time.
the army, she was William Cathay. And she was in the army, and she did get a disability discharge. So she had people working on her behalf trying to get her disability, but it was rejected, so she never got it. She ended up in Colorado. That's where she was. And then nobody could find her grave, and the only reason they list her death date as 1893 is because she fell off the census. She had been on the census all along, and then all of a sudden she fell off, but there's no grave or anything. So it wasn't until 2016 that she was recognized as a female heroine in the army, fighting for being recognized, even if she had to disguise herself. And so there is a bronze statue in Leavenworth, Kansas, of her in the Rose Garden, showing her importance to our history.
Let's go through just a few things on here, because this quilt is so detailed, and it's her life cycle,
Right.
is what I'm saying. But just for my audience, for people who may not know a few things, at this time when she enlisted in the army, why did she enlist as a man? Why did she have to enlist as a man?
Because females weren't being accepted.
Right, so females were not allowed to participate in the army or any service at that time.
Right.
So here we have where she was born on a Missouri tobacco plantation. Most people, whenever they think of slavery or hear of slavery, they only think of cotton. But slaves were also brought over for tobacco as well. Explain
Yes.
that.
Well, slaves were brought in different parts of America. They all didn't land in one spot.
Absolutely.
Okay. Well, in Missouri, plantation, there was tobacco. They probably had cotton too, but they also had tobacco plantations. And it just so happened that she was born on the tobacco plantation. So there were a lot of plantations, not just cotton.
And during this time, so she makes it to the Union Army as a cook and a laundress and whatever else they're, have her there for. But the Union Army, let us know what the Union Army was fighting for.
Fighting for it was a civil war.
Yes.
It was fighting for the North against the South,
yes,
and slavery and so forth. Okay, and this led up to the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863. Of course, in Texas, it was 1865 before we found out, so we were kind of just free-ish. We weren't
yes,
free until 1865. But yeah, we were fighting for the right to not be slaves.
Exactly. So she was fighting, I always like to say she was fighting for, even though it wasn't America at that time, she was fighting for America. And she was fighting for people that looked like you and me, but we just hadn't made it here yet.
Right. And she needed something to do to make money, and this was her life. So she knew she could do this. So this is why she chose the Army. Yeah.
And this quote, I wanted to make a living, not being dependent on relatives or friends. People still say that today. In 2024, people still say that quote today.
That's true.
Yeah. And not maybe necessarily knowing that it came from Cathy Williams or William Cathy, but we still think that way to this day. So that's amazing that quote has lived on so much. And then her, her discharge, her disability application rejected. I am sure there are a lot of people in the service who still get that.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this everything is amazing. And as you were talking about when she moved to Colorado and became a seamstress in 1893, it really reminded me of what you are doing now. That tradition has just continued of sewing and quilting has continued until now.
Yes, it has. And I've actually only started doing the art quilting since 2020. And I'm passionate about it now. And the fact that I started with some of our history that people are not aware of, it kind of sparked me to do that. So most of my quilts, 98% of my quilts now have to do with little known Black history.
I did notice that, and we will talk about that more in the podcast interview. Again, this quilt is in the Art Museum in Orange, Texas. And they have acquired it, which is congratulations
awesome.
To you.
Thank you,
congratulations.
Stark Museum.
Thank you, Stark Museum, for acquiring such a beautiful quilt piece. How long will this be up?
They have it until August. And then from here, I'm not sure where it's going, to one of the Carolinas, I think.
South Carolina.
Yeah, but they have it from now until August the 3rd, I believe.
So anyone who is listening to my podcast, that is watching the podcast right now, please come and see this beautiful quilt done by my podcast guest, Georgia Williams. It is going to be on display at the Art Museum in Orange, Texas until August 3rd, 2024. So you still have plenty time to come and check out this quilt yourself. Go ahead, Ms. Williams.
And what I wanted to say was, I love my quilt. I'm very passionate about what I did, but the whole exhibit of the Black Pioneers' Legacy in the American West is extraordinary, and you owe it to yourself if you're within distance to come and see it, because you will be totally amazed.
And I would like to add, because I'm just this person, even if you're not in distance, come and see this exhibit by car, by train, by plane. Get here if you can, as the song says. Let's talk about some of your quilts that you have done. The first one that we're looking at right now is titled, We Are One. This one has a picture of different races of women on it and the 7 continents. But what really stuck out to me was most women have no faces. So my first question with this is, was that intentional to leave out their faces? And what was the thinking behind this quilt that we're looking at?
Okay, this particular quilt was part of a challenge, a mystery challenge. In the group that I belong to, Quilt Africa Fabrics, I was sent a mystery bundle of fabrics that I had to use to make the quilt. And the title of the theme of the competition was cultural diversity. And you could use any other fabric that you wanted culture-wise, like any other cultural fabric that you wanted to use, but you had to use the fabrics that they sent as well. So when I started thinking about cultural diversity, I started thinking about the different cultures, you know, the different representations of all of the different people, not just black people. And so I decided, okay, let's do something with women, and let me do a woman of each of the nationalities and dress them in their native dress, you know, and I'm going to put the continents behind them to represent the whole world. You know, we're one, everybody is one. Mm-hmm. Now the reason I didn't put faces is because I want people that look at it to see themselves in it. Not
like a mirror.
Exactly. So that's why there are no faces. There's an Indian, there's a black woman, and there's a Caucasian, there's an Indian, there's a Native American. So yeah, when they look at it, I want them to see themselves, not to see, say if I put your face on it or whatever, not to see Crystal. I want you to see yourself, and that's why there's no face.
That is so amazing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, that's such a great idea. Why did you name this quilt We Are One?
Because the theme was about cultural diversity. Even though we're diverse, we are still one people as far as the world goes. We're all one people, and if people could just grasp that concept, the world would be so much better off. So, and I'm proud to say that particular quilt is at I was contacted by the State Department for it to be displayed at an embassy in Estonia, Tallinn, Estonia. So it's in another country right now being displayed at a U.S. embassy, and that was amazing to me.
And how did they
Such an
contact
honor.
you? Did they just call you and say?
No, actually, in my learning about art quilts and so forth, one of my mentors told me about this site called Art and Embassies. And as an artist, not just a quilting artist, any kind of artist, there's a registry where you could upload your work. And any embassy, any ambassador, incoming ambassador, whatever, they get to decorate their embassy the way they want to. They pick their own art. They pick it. So they're
Did not know that.
I know, for their tenure, whether 2 or 3 years or however long they're going to be there, they get to choose what they want to hang. And there's always an art exhibit. And so they go to the Art and Embassies registry to look at the work. And this particular ambassador, George Kent, and his wife Adelia, they chose my quilt as one of the ones that they wanted. And then when she contacted me and said she was calling from the State Department, of course you think.
This is not real.
I know, right? But I had registered my art, so I knew it could have been. And it was, and I was very, very honored to be, so I'm international now too.
You are international as well as Orange, Texas. You are international. Okay, let's look at another one of your pieces. This one is Black Mermaids from Africa to America. I love this one because, speaking just personally, when I'm watching TV and cartoons, you never see a black mermaid.
Right.
Like, I didn't even think that was a thing, that was a possibility, at least until Disney came out with, their revamped version of A Little Mermaid with Haley as the mermaid who is African American. Why was it important for you to tell this story and have black mermaids?
Okay, this was another exhibit that I was invited to participate in, and Black Mermaids was the name of it. So I started doing my research, and I found out, and since it says from Africa to America, in Africa, black mermaids are a real thing. They're considered water goddesses, and they exist to them. Okay, so I started doing my research, and there's my particular black mermaid is called Mami Wata, and it means mother water. And they have a feast every year in Africa on June the 25th, celebrating this water goddess. Okay, and so that was my quilt, is that rendition of the water goddess, the mermaid, and then all of the people at the bottom who were dancing and playing instruments and whatever. And so yeah, that's how, usually most of them come from an invitation. I want to, I didn't come up with Black Mermaid. I was invited to create a Black Mermaid. Yeah.
I just think whoever thought that Black Mermaid should be the theme, I just want to thank them. Because it was like, so much of what we see on TV is not reflective of us. And then when you see something like Black Mermaid, you're like, oh, that actually could be a thing.
I know. And then the actual exhibition was amazing with all the different, just like this one. You have your piece, but then you see the creativity from so many other people and what they created in their mermaid and whatever, and it was just amazing. It's still on display.
When people look at your quilts, what do you want them to take away from it?
I wanted to evoke emotion, first of all, and I wanted to be thought-provoking, where they look at it, because a lot of people will say, you know what, I can stand here and look at this, and I see something different in every part of the quilt. And it's things that I didn't know, or things that I didn't think about, or whatever. And I'm hoping that, like I said, it will evoke some sort of emotion and get people to start thinking after they leave about it, and maybe research it or whatever, and just get a different mindset.
And what is your personal intention? I want to say you've been doing quilting since you were 9. Of course, you've taken some vacations during that time, but at this point in your life, what is your personal intention with quilting?
Is to continue with the theme of visual Black history. There are other quilts that I do if something comes to mind. It may be, I did one that was called Black Joy. It's not all about the negative. It's about the African American experience, whether it be negative or positive or whatever. And that's, art-wise, that's what I want to continue to do. I very rarely do a traditional quilt now. I just don't. Because this is just all consuming. But I want to continue with the African American experience, whether it be something that was negative in our past, or something that's positive in our present, or something that's even more positive in our future. So I have a next year, well not next year, this year, later, there's going to be a solo exhibit. I'm going to have probably about 16 quilts, and the theme is going to be visual Black history, past, present, and future.
And where is that? Are you at liberty to say where that exhibit will be?
Well, the proposal was made to the Houston International Quilt Festival, and hopefully that's where it will be. I have to wait for the official, yes, you've been accepted or whatever. But they were the ones that invited me, so I can't imagine that it wouldn't be accepted.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'm going to go with it.
Yes, we're going to say on this podcast that you will be, they will give you the yes on that. So if someone who's watching this podcast, who's listening to this podcast, Georgia, wants to start quilting, what is the first few steps they need to do? What equipment do they need to have?
Well, you could start with just a needle and thread, but if you're really serious about starting to make quilts or learning how to make quilts, I would get a sewing machine, and there's tons of YouTube videos out there on how to quilt or whatever. There's a lot of information on the internet about how to get things started. There's local guilds, there's local classes in places that sell sewing machine or sell quilting fabric. They have classes. A lot of people do workshops and whatever. So if you're really interested in learning how, the resources are out there.
What have you learned about yourself since kind of diving headfirst into quilting and staying within that space?
Well, one thing that I learned about myself is that, as you get older, and I just turned 70.
Well, happy birthday.
Thank
you.
you.
Amazing.
Thank you. You wonder when you get older, well, what am I going to do when I retire? I know what I'm going to do. You know what I'm saying? I'm going to do this as long as I can. So that's kind of what I learned about myself is I'm locked into doing this. I'm passionate about it. And the Orange Museum just acquired one of my quilts.
Yes.
So it's becoming lucrative.
Yes. Yes.
So yeah, I don't have to be concerned about what I'm gonna do. You know, because I have a lot of friends and relatives who, they get lost when they retire. It's like, well, you know, I'm so bored and whatever. So everybody just needs to find their space and find their happy place and what they can do. So this is my happy place.
I'm glad that you found it, and you're right. A lot of people, I mean, even people that are not retired or they're not even near retirement age, still don't know their happy place. Still haven't figured out what brings them true joy and true peace within their everyday life. So it's amazing that you figured that out.
Yeah, I'm blessed.
Yes, absolutely. On the other side of that coin, what have you had to unlearn in order to be so successful and find such happiness in the quilting space?
One of the things I had to unlearn is believing that, especially when I first started, is believing that you have to imitate somebody. You have to, when you see something that you like, I want her to teach me how to do that, or whatever. What you have to unlearn, and what I unlearned, was do you. Don't try to imitate somebody else. And it's really one of the reasons I don't do workshops. I don't want you to learn what I do. I want you to learn what you do. I want you to learn what's inside you. And if I can help you navigate that, and if you have a particular question about a technique that I used, I'd be more than happy to answer it. But I'm not going to teach you how to make what I make. I get a lot of questions about, do you have a pattern? Well, no, I don't have a pattern. It's a one of a kind. I don't want you making what I made. I want you to make what you make. So I had to unlearn that, because in the beginning, when I first started doing this, I did see a lot, and I started doing like, okay, let me see how she did this. I want to make one like that, or whatever. And so that's why I don't do like block of the month club, where everybody makes the same block. You know, everybody ends up with the same quilt. No, I unlearned imitating. That's what I unlearned.
Okay. Your quilts are very detailed. You have letters, as you spoke about with the poem, The Negro Mother. You have pictures and faces on your quilts. How do you do that? Like, how do you get the letters on there? How do you get the faces on there?
Trial and error. No, actually, the more you, and another one of my quilters, when I first started doing just quilts, she would quilt it for me. And I started doing art quilts, and I would get her feedback, because I do have several people that I get feedback from. It's not a solitary, it's a community. It's not a solitary thing. It's you, but when you're stuck on something, you can get somebody's feedback and grow from that. But she told me, because I had transferred some letters to a quilt that I had done, and she said, that's beautiful, but if you had appliqued the letters on, as opposed to just transferring them on there, it would be so much more valuable and so much more beautiful, and more of your work had gone into it. So all the letters, unless they're so tiny you can't stitch around them, are transfers.
And what does that mean, transfer?
The transfer means you could take a piece of paper, you could print it out on the computer, and then you could iron the letter on.
Okay.
And it's just like plastic. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
It's not fabric.
Yes.
It's transferred on by heat.
Okay.
So she said, if you can applique everything that you can.
And what does applique mean?
Applique means you actually take a piece of fabric and you stitch around it. You cut out the shape that you want, like for instance the faces or whatever, and you stitch around it, you applique around it, as opposed to just printing it on there. So applique means you stitch around it. Yeah, it's an actual piece of fabric.
Your quilts, do you draw out your quilts before you create them, like on a piece of paper or something?
No, and a lot of quilters do that, especially applique quilting. They will quilt it out or whatever. I usually do it on the computer. If it's real detailed, I will get all the components, a picture of all the components or something that I'm thinking about, and do like a Word file.
Okay.
You know, and compile it that way, and come up with what my idea is going to be. And then I take my file to like a Kinko's, I don't think they exist anymore.
I don't think so either.
But like
I know what you're talking about.
I take them to Staples, and I decide what size I want it to be, and I get them to print my images out on blueprint paper, because they can do that in black and white, and it's very inexpensive, and it's large enough. It's 36 inches, about however long you want it to be. So they print my patterns, and then when I come back home, I can cut the pieces, the individual pieces out, and use them as my patterns.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, I read that you said the quilts lead me wherever they are destined to go. How do you know where they're destined to go?
Well, you start with, I will say this, none of the quilts that I start end up the way that I started them. They all transition through the whole process. And it's usually me, I have a design wall, and that's a wall in my sewing room where I can actually put the quilt on the wall, as opposed to get that perspective of the art, as opposed to just laying it on the table and looking at it. It's a whole different ball game.
Okay.
So when I'm looking at it, you can do what you're going to do, and then you can stand back from it and look at it and say something's not right. You know, what is it? You know, and then you'll go and you'll change something else, whatever. And then it's kind of that, I thought this is what I wanted, but not really, kind of thing. So yeah, it kind of takes a mind of its own. Just like the Negro Mother one, when I wanted to do a quilt with pictures and this and that, none of that could capture that point. So the quilt led me, do the poem.
Yes.
I know, a lot of times I'll dream about something like the George Floyd quilt I did, came to me in a dream, and yeah, so.
How do you know when a quilt is finished?
You really don't. There's always something you want to do to it, but the thing that saves me are deadlines. When you submit something to somewhere, there's a deadline.
Mm-hmm.
So you eventually have to be satisfied that it's all it could be. But as an artist, you never do that. You're your worst critic. So there's always something else you want to do to it. And so for me, when it's finished is when I have to submit it.
Okay.
So yeah.
You stated that you've made 50 to 60 quilts so far. Do you have a favorite?
One of my favorites is the Negro Mother.
Okay.
As simple as it is, half the quilt has the poem on it, and the other half of the quilt has the Negro Mother, a picture of a Negro Mother. The other one that's one of my favorites is called the Middle Passage Guardian. It just means a lot. I'm very stoic. I don't show a lot of emotion, but that one and the Negro Mother one made me well up when you know what I'm saying? Yeah. It's like, so yeah, those are my favorites. And as many quilts as I've made, I've never made one for myself.
Why?
I don't know. I don't have well, first of all, I don't a lot of people like to cuddle up and whatever. I'm not a wrap it up in a blanket and cut. That's my husband. He likes to wrap up and whatever. But I've never made one for myself. I'm not for my bed, not for the couch, I've never made one. I may eventually, but one of those I'm keeping, either the Negro Mother or the Middle Passage Guardian. I don't know which one yet.
Okay.
But those are my two favorites.
You have several quilts that are on display in different museums, international as well. When the display comes down, do they send those quilts back to you, or what is that process?
Well, if the exhibit is over, they send it back to me. This particular exhibit started in Florida 2 years ago, and it's gone from Florida to Georgia to California and down to Texas. So if it's in a traveling exhibit, it goes on to the next. Otherwise, it comes back to you.
Okay. Now, this quilt behind us, the Cathy Williams quilt, is going to stay here in Orange, Texas at the Art Museum because they have acquired that one, correct?
Yes. It's
so what does that mean?
That means they have a permanent collection of art that they keep as part of their permanent collection. And that's what that means. They've acquired it and now it's going to be here.
Is this your first quilt that's been acquired by an art museum?
Yes. Okay. And I'm very honored, and I've met wonderful people who love my work as much as I do. Absolutely. And who get it.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, this is the first one acquired by a museum.
And I would say that's also something that when people look at your quilts, that they get it.
That's exactly my point.
That's
my point. When somebody looks at my quilt, I want them to get it. I don't want them to wonder. You know, like when you look at abstract art, You look at it and you think,
What
what are they
is
trying
he
to
trying to
say?
say?
You know what
Yes.
I'm saying? I want them to know exactly what I'm trying to say. I want to hit them over the head with a hammer. This is what this quilt is talking about. You know, so yeah.
Okay, so as we wrap up this interview, what would you say, just give me advice for people that are going to come to the Art Museum in Orange, Texas and see your quilt. What piece of advice, what do you want them to take away from this quilt specifically?
I want them to learn something that they possibly did not know, and I want them to open their mind to the possibility that other things exist in this world, other than that little bubble that they've been living in.
Yes.
Okay? And all of these quilts tell a story. Every last one of them has a black pioneer on it. And it's a different black pioneer because we couldn't do the same subject. So take away what you will from each quilt. Don't just glance at it and go. Read the story behind it. There's an artist statement beside each quilt that the artist, what they were thinking about and what inspired them to do the quilt the way they did it. So if you've taken the time to come to a museum, enjoy the whole experience. Don't just look at it as a pretty picture. Yeah.
And again, your quilt, Cathy Williams, is going to be on display here in Orange, Texas at the Art Museum from Wednesday until Saturday, 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. until August the 3rd, 2024.
Exactly.
So please come out and view this quilt, but not just your quilt, but all of the quilts in the space. My final question for you, Ms. Georgia Williams, who do you think would make a great guest on the podcast, but you have to help me get them on?
I have a couple of people that I'm so impressed with because of their entrepreneurial spirit. And they teach their teachers, they inspire. So Jael Moody is who I would represent to you to reach out to and see if she's willing to share and educate people about what it is that she does.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Georgia Williams, for sitting down with me and just giving me your lived experience through quilting. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely. And before I wrap up, let me just give a huge thank you to the Art Museum in Orange, Texas. They actually shut down this area so we could do this podcast, and I just want to say thank you so much for investing in my podcast and investing in what I am trying to do. Again, come out and see the quilt exhibit here at the Art Museum in Orange, Texas. It will be here from Wednesday until Saturday from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. So by car, train, plane, make sure you get here. You can get this podcast and all of my other podcasts on YouTube Podcasts and Apple Podcasts. And remember, you always have time to listen and learn on the go.
Come on, let's go on a journey. Sit back, buckle up, enjoy the ride with Crystal Petry. Console.